Thanks for tuning in to Power Athlete Radio. We just can't get enough of Ron McKeefery from PLAE Performance. His enthusiasm for coaching is fueled by his sense of obligation to change lives. And if you're looking for motivation to jumpstart your own passion for training others, you need to listen to this episode. He has made weight room leadership an art by studying the greats and by field testing his own philosophies. This includes maybe the taboo practice of defining the term good for athletes with lofty pro goals. Learn how Ron harnesses their desire for sports success by showing them exactly where they are and exactly where they need to be to make their dreams a reality. Suddenly, you as a coach will become that integral vehicle to making change, first physically and then psychologically. Here it is, episode 311.
Make this run on time. A little while pill for them little white lines I'm smoking.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm a flat Earth Game of Throneser. That's the stance I'm taking. That's the stance I'm taking.
This is the intro to the premier podcast of strength and or conditioning.
No, dude, we can't. Like, you messed up the tagline.
It's the podcast of strength or conditioning.
Ing.
How about this? The podcast of conditioning. Ing.
Are you making like Game
strength.
of Thrones? Ing?
No. Game on Thrones.
Oh, okay.
Is that like Heroes on the Half Shell or in the Half Shell?
They're in the shell, like in it.
But they said the Heroes in the Half Shell. The problem is the shell is a 360 shell.
Mm-hmm. So think about it.
So they got shells in their back. They also got shells
No,
in
but
their
they hide in it. So when they hide in their shell, they're heroes, and them coming out.
But they say half shell. The half shell would mean that it's a half shell, not a full shell.
But isn't hero just another name for a sandwich?
That's a euro. That's a gyro.
Now I get it. Power Athlete Nation. What's happening? This is another episode of the premier podcast in strength and condition.
Ing.
That's right. I'm Luke.
Luke's pointing at me. Tex
is going to point at John.
Oh, and
or
special
featured
guest? Oh, I thought it was special guest, not featured guest.
No. Ron McKeefery our special guest.
Oh, I'm the featured guest.
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome.
And who are you?
I'm John Welbourn.
I don't believe you. That was not confident enough. I'm Ron Burgundy.
I was trying to say it with a question mark that I'm reading off my teleprompter that somebody put on there.
Who put the question mark on the teleprompter?
And remember, go fuck yourself, San Diego. What's wrong?
Show.
Way to knock that out. Ron, you're fired. You're fired. Oh, by Odin's beard.
Unique New York, red leather, yellow leather. Ladies and gentlemen, I have two announcements to make. Number one, since we've been recording these, Tex, which one did I announce the 400 likes giveaway? Or the 400 review giveaway?
I don't listen to this show. Are you kidding?
Ladies and gentlemen, you may have heard this already, or this may be the first time you're hearing this. We are going to arrange an epic swag giveaway once we reach 400 reviews on iTunes.
Oh, we're at 323.
Shit. Maybe I should have made it 1,000.
Well, date check, but...
Okay.
Let's go with 400.
Yeah, 400. And what could be in this swag bag? Maybe some used cotton swabs. Maybe some of Tex's Band-Aids. Toenail clippings. Are these the things that people want from Tex?
I think I'm going to throw up.
No?
No.
You know,
I mean, have you ever seen
wear Band-Aids?
Have you ever seen?
Then fine. I guess we'll just
I
settle.
don't think I've ever seen Tex's feet, other than that one time I saw that mole, and now I can't unseen that mole.
I train barefoot.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you have spoken. We will shave Tex's eyebrow, and you can get his eyebrow hair. No?
No.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this episode is brought to you in part by Power Athlete Radio. If you're digging this stuff, if you like what you're hearing, if you enjoy the guests, if you enjoy the stories, if you enjoy the banter, head to iTunes and give us a review, right? Mm-hmm. It better be 5 stars, or John's going to come slap you with a wet trout. Is that true?
Wet trout? I mean, I thought it was a frozen trout, but I'll go with the wet trout.
Well, frozen's technically wet. It's just a different
By the time he gets to your house,
that trout will be wet.
God, can you imagine geting hit with a frozen fish? Fuck,
Yeah.
that would hurt.
All the time. And
no, that's the dead fish.
I have a good story about that.
That's for another podcast.
Yes.
That's the other podcast we do.
I'm a dead fish. And ladies and gentlemen, on to the next piece. If you are a strength coach, and I'm guessing, man, given our guest today, Ron McKeefery, I mean, prolific strength coach, right? And really switched on.
He's like the strength coach's strength coach.
He is, because he switched on to like all of the...
He's the gentleman strength coach.
All of the like social components that a strength coach can influence in an athlete. And, you know, he's tied in with fucking everybody, man, and develops coaches and is just changing... I guess not changing the profession, but turning the
paradigm
up, right?
Changing the paradigm is really what you're searching for.
No, I'll tell you what's going to change paradigm, John, is if you're a coach and you're looking for some professional development, you want to up your coach's game, you got to head to academy.powerathletehq.com, because we are currently enrolling in the next semester of the premier online course in strength and conditioning. The Power Athlete Methodology Level 1 course. Take it away, Tex.
So we essentially have taken information, a lot of which, you know, we have a principle-based system, you know, that one of our one-liners we took from Ron McKeefery back in one of his first episodes with us, and have pieced together the methodology in an applicable order, right? So it's not a matter of memorizing X's and O's of strength and conditioning. It's understanding principles. It's understanding how to coach and teach movement, and then walk into your weight room with your athletes and then coach them up. We also put it along with our Bedrock program, so you are applying this program and watching how the adaptations that we speak of, the directions to apply this program unfold right before your eyes. And you're going to develop as a coach, as your athletes develop right alongside you.
9 sections, 44 lessons, one hell of a workbook, I might add, that includes no less than 5 Fast and Furious quotes to up your strength and conditioning prowess. Am I wrong? Am I wrong?
No, you're wrong. You're wrong.
I am wrong. There's only 2.
Yeah, no, sorry.
but
there is a little gone in 60 seconds in there. Let's go.
There is more movie quotes in this strength and conditioning volume than any other strength and conditioning volume published.
This is very true.
Would you agree?
Oh, man. Yeah, that's why we wrote it that way.
I know.
Well, we only speak in movie quotes.
That'll happen.
Yeah.
That will happen.
That'll happen.
Caught doing the repeater.
Yeah. Hey, it's just those movie quotes happen to be Super Troopers.
5+ hours of video content. Man, if you were to just dig in and go every day, you probably get this sucker done in 30 days. But that's not how we want you to do it. We want you to apply it. You go at your own pace, on your own device, and you dig in, and you have up to a year to complete this thing. And it's very rare that people don't. And then when they don't, let me tell you why they don't. They're like, oh, man, I started this, and just by the very nature of learning this stuff, I became better looking, and now I'm a professional model. So, like, that was one person that...
Spoke for everybody.
That spoke for everybody.
Yeah.
So that's the only reason that you wouldn't finish it.
Well, male models, idiot.
I'm a model, idiot. But, ladies and gentlemen, academy.powerathletehq.com. That's where you're going to learn all about that methodology course.
And see a endorsement from our featured, our special guest.
Special guest, Ron McKeefery.
I don't think you guys asked me for a quote.
No. What would you have to say?
My quotes are inside the book.
Yeah. All right, people. Should we talk about us more?
No.
They're
tired.
Like everybody wants.
They are tired of hearing about us.
One quick note: if you do go to iTunes to leave a review, read the other reviews because they're getting pretty ridiculous.
Why?
Like what?
Lots of rock star quotes. Lots of just speaking of our value on movies versus anything to do with strength and conditioning. Like one guy is going to us for just movie banter that he used to have in his unit when he was deployed. Not strength and conditioning information.
Yeah, we don't have any good shit.
It's just reminding him of his good old time with his bros back in deployment.
You know who hasn't?
Nothing to do with strength.
You know who hasn't given us a review yet? Penguins. I wonder if any penguins are going to show up and talk about how they were liberated from Antarctica due to their athleticism.
We did that strength and conditioning seminar in Antarctica, and we worked with penguins. I mean, toes forward.
So I wonder if any penguins.
You know, the weird part is they don't really have knees.
Man, could you imagine if we got a review that was along the lines of like, hey, I'm a penguin. I fucking love this podcast.
You know what? Until they came along and taught me toes forward, I was walking duck-footed because I have no knees. Now,
how embarrassing.
Now they walk penguin-footed.
Okay.
This could be the last one, people. We could get voted inappropriate for being absolutely moronic. Luckily, we have the saving grace of guests like Ron McKeefery, who is right around the corner after we tell this one extra story about Antarctica. Just kidding. All right, let's do it. Everybody ready? Ready, go.
I'm trying to think of all the places we've been in, from your kitchen to this room where it looked like something out of like a CIA, holding tank.
Without a doubt, the best was the SoCal office. Like, could you imagine if we were on a podcast when that one dude who looked like he was from like the fucking Reservoir Dogs walked in with the black eye and like the ponytail and leather coat, just wandered in through the back bay door of our gym, Ron, and just like walked right into the office in Southern California, Costa Mesa, and he's like, I don't even.
No, let me set the stage. The guy's about 6'4", maybe about 215, 220 pounds, kind of tall, skinny dude. Scraggly beard, long ponytail, pulled back, balding. He had a fucking bloody, like a day old bloody lip. Big ass black eye. Was wearing like a wife beater with a leather coat with like a gold chain and track pants.
Good Lord!
And the dude walks in, and it's like, I want to say it was pretty early in the morning, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like 9.
And this guy walks in and is like, hey, I'm just checking these units out and wanted to look around your spot. And I kind of heard it, and I turn and I see the look on Callie's face, which is like, oh, fuck. Like this dude is like something out of a movie. And I fucking turn around and I see this dude, and he's got some like other shady black dude with him. And at that point, I don't have or my gun was in the car, or I would have pulled it, but I fucking grabbed that fucking knife that I had that's like a baton, and I stand up and I'm like fucking ready to fucking kill this dude.
To set the scene for listeners, it was the John Welbourn equivalent of the hair standing up on the back of a fucking gnarly ass pit bull. I'm like, okay, this insert Michael Jackson meme eating popcorn. Even though that's probably culturally insensitive with all the MJ stuff. But
nah, Thriller's still cool.
Yeah, nonetheless, I'm like, oh shit, this is gonna go. I feel pretty safe here. John's up there.
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna kill this dude. I fucking basically told that dude to get the fuck out of there before I fucking killed him. I mean, it was like, there was no escalation of force. It was like, how the cops, something goes down and they go to a 10. I was ready to fucking basically fight this dude to the death within a step.
Not me. I was like, there's the sliding door. I'll just.
It was, dude, if you would have seen this cat, it was something out of a movie. The dude had just got his ass beat, some, just a bad deal.
It's got to be like The Longest Yard, right? Where you're sitting down and all of a sudden you stand up and you just keep rising the dude's.
Oh, well, dude, when I turned and the look of fear on Callie's face was like, and I remember being like, what? And then I see the dude and I'm like, oh shit, man, this is a shakedown. I seriously thought they were coming in to rob us or something.
A shakedown, a motherfucking breakdown.
It was, dude, it was a fucking bad, and then the crazy part is where we were in Costa Mesa, if you drew a beeline between this area that's called the jungle. So what they did is a lot of the homeless and the displaced in Orange County, the cops kind of ushered them down by the Santa Ana River, and they were living in this installment down there by the river, like a camp. And there was, dude, at any one point, I think there was a few thousand of them down there, and they get all whacked out on drugs. And the cops just as long as they stayed there, it was okay. But it was periodically they would make a line from where they were to Costa Mesa, Newport Beach, where all the stores and the restaurants are. And they had to walk through our parking lot. So all of a sudden we'd be there 6 a.m. training, and
that's always good.
Zombie vampires, 3 days on meth, just wandering around our building, just swimming in garbage cans. And I'm like, oh my God, dude.
Just a normal day.
Yeah, you have two options. In that scenario, you have two options, Ron. And I think, number one is the route that we took, which is just protect the layer. And then our neighbor down the street and next door, who did some T-shirt stuff for us, was just welcome them in. Just welcome them in. And they're yeah, we're good with the zombie meth people. That's Charlie. He's great.
Yeah. We give him they want Mike and Ike's and candy. I'm like, what the fuck? He's like, yeah, make sure I always have Mike and Ike's. I really like that. I'm like he had the Halloween Mike and Ike's and would give it to him. And I'm like, dude, stop feeding the stray bears.
The zombies.
Yeah, the zombies. They come back. Oh yeah. It was, the day we left and drove out of that place, I remember thinking, thank God this didn't happen soon enough.
Well, seems like the farm's coming together, man, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's great. It's, we don't have to worry about zombies.
That's true. Because if the zombies wander on property in Texas, it's like The Walking Dead. Fucking just machete to the fucking brain.
Yeah, no, they're in Texas. I believe it's purple fence posts. So if there's a purple fence post, it's they've been signaled that this is a private area, do not access. And so I think they have castle doctrine. And I was reading all these laws when I went through my concealed gun class, and it's like, your castle extends to your vehicle. Anybody, Texas is very, liberal on that stuff, at least on the books. I can't imagine if you actually had to execute any of it or execute anyone. I'm sure it would be less fun.
Absolutely,
yeah, right.
Man.
Yeah, but Texas is an interesting place.
So, Ron, what's going on, man?
Not much. Staying super busy lately. Like we just talked about off camera a little bit. Just got back from England. We had a clinic there. Spoke at that event. Worked with a couple teams while I was there, and between that and all the things we got going on with PLAE Perform, it's keeping me busy.
Nice. So for listeners who may be early adopters, not like some of the folks we met this last weekend who've been listening since episode 50, our boy Gil, right? Ron, you were on, this is your third time, the Trinity.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, 194 and 161. So in case anyone hasn't listened to those or doesn't know, what you're dabbling in and who the heck you are, Ron, can you give a little elevator pitch?
Yeah, sure. Been strength coach for close to 25 years now. I coached most of my career in the NFL and collegiate football, and left collegiate about 3 years ago to essentially start a company within PLAE called PLAE Perform. And PLAE, as most people know, is a flooring company that specializes in putting in elite flooring, track, turf, weight room floors and facilities around the world. But they wanted to start, very much like Nike's a shoe company, their performance brand. They always saw themselves as a performance brand. So they brought me in to run and develop a performance and education element of the company. And that's evolved into, on the education side, we have our labs, our clinics. We have an app, a platform, an education platform that's pretty cool. We're partnered with certifications to be able to offer those around the world. And then on the performance side, we have remote coaching. We have consulting and customization, which is a lot of what I do, work with teams, going in and designing programs and teaching it to the coaches, and then helping the coaches teach it to the athletes. And then we have coaching services where we supply coaches. We have 29 coaches over in China right now. We've got coaches in Mexico and around the U.S. And it's really developed into a pretty cool model and business that's keeping me quite busy.
Sounds like it, man. Wrangling the cats, wrangling the coaches.
That's exactly right.
Oh, yeah.
But when I think what's most important is John and I and Luke and Tex, we've all talked before. I mean, I started in NFL Europe early in my career. I coached over in NFL Europe, and that was the first time I'd ever been out of the country, much less really out of the state, even almost. And went over to Berlin, Germany for 4 months and coached over there, and it opened up and made the world a really small place in that time. And since then, I've spoken around the world. We adopted our 4 kids internationally. And so making a global impact was super important. It's been super important to me, and using kind of the abilities that, God's given me, which is strength and conditioning to make that impact. That's what's been, that's why I left. That's ultimately why I left college athletics, pro athletics is, felt like I was bigger than the 4 walls of a weight room. God intended for me to be bigger than the 4 walls of the weight room. And I wanted to make that global impact, and so it's been fun building that and seeing where that's gone.
So was that like a gradual progression and realization, or was there a moment you kind of saw the vision and you knew you wanted to pivot?
I went from the Cincinnati Bengals to Eastern Michigan, which was, when we got there, they had just they had a player murdered on the team from the city. It was outside Detroit. It's not a great area, head coach had been fired for verbally abusing the players. There was 52 of the 78 kids that tested positive for drugs. There was a racism incident on campus. There's all these things, the problems that you could imagine, and basically a place that you would never go if you were coming from the NFL, and places like that. I mean, there's a verse in the Bible that talks about you don't throw light into the light, you throw light into the darkness. And I think it's easy as coaches to coach the kids that want to train, that want to work hard, that want to win. It's a lot harder to coach the kids that they have that kind of poverty mentality. They don't know how to win. They don't know how to do those types of things. And you go back to some of Carol DeWick's work with growth mindset versus fixed mindset and some of those types of things. And it was a challenge that I ran to, ultimately, and the head coach ran to it. And within 3 years, we got it to a bowl game, and it's been to 2 bowl games in the last 3 years. And it's a program that hadn't had a winning season in over 20 years, not even a winning season, let alone bowl games. And so once we did that, once we kind of felt like we got it turned, then it was like, now what? It was something where kind of got it running on all cylinders. And, you look at your career and you say, I could go back to the NFL. I could go to, major college. I turned down a couple really key jobs at that time, and felt like there were just more important things, from a legacy type of standpoint than to just show up to the weight room every day and basically have something that was going on all 4 cylinders.
Man.
Yeah.
It's, can you reflect a little bit on some of the tactics, if possible, that you use to turn that deal around? Because I'm thinking like the closest thing we've hit to that, like such a dark area, not necessarily in terms of the violence or potentially like that dark of a culture, but just a dark spot is the PE programs that we've tried to like flip. And here in Texas, Ron, we've worked with a few districts who are, leadership is doing their best to empower the Texas PE system to bring it back to a core curriculum, which means like kids go and they get to go and get credit for it. But man, I'll tell you, those coaches in there have just been beat down,
Right.
Well, it's a cultural thing, and I don't mean like cultural in terms of like, hey, let's go experience Indian food, but I think over time when there's like a culture of kind of everything just kind of brushed aside, like it doesn't matter. I think after a while, people, and then all it takes is like 1 or 2 iterations. I mean, you think in college football, really, a class gets done in about 4 years, maybe 5 if they redshirt. So if you think about like how quickly a college program changes, it can be as quick as like 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. Think about if you bring in a bad draft class and all of a sudden, like, after the first year, half of those guys are gone, and then the guys that stay are kind of, to use a familiar term, Ron will know, the shitbirds, as they're commonly referred to in college and professional sports. So, and then those guys stay, and then that culture comes, and then they infect some of the younger guys, and then finally you get those guys out of there, and you bring in a coach, strength coach, and coaches that really have a very kind of low tolerance for bullshit, and to get rid of those guys. And like, man, like I've seen college programs where they just wholesale fucking get rid of dudes because they're like, fuck, man, they're poisoning the team. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure, going into the situation Ron was, like you have these guys that are indoctrinated into this culture, and they've had 2 or 3 generations, and you almost have to like bring in some pretty good guys and then like kind of nurse them along and just hope the other guys fucking wash out. And it's just, and it takes, 2 or 3, 4 years, and hopefully, the coach comes in and stays, and, nothing crazy happens. And then all of a sudden you see this like change in culture, and it happens relatively quickly.
That's the word right there. I mean, culture is everything. And I think so many times as coaches, that's the hard part, right? We think it's about the X's and O's, and we think it's about sets and reps. And ultimately, if you don't create a culture to support your vision, it doesn't matter, And to answer your question, Luke, I think, there's 2 authors, Chip and Dan Heath. I don't know if you guys have read any of their books, but they have 4 books, and all 4 books are in my top 5 that I recommend coaches read. But they have a book called Switch. It's all about changing a culture, and in that culture, they give the visualization of a man riding an elephant down a path. And the man represents the rational mind. The elephant is the emotional side of things, and they the path is the situational world, right? And so as a coach, you have to, so many times we want to speak only to the rational mind. We have these people that go in and they go into the inner city schools, they go into the bad situations, and they start talking about all the things they should be doing. And they think that just speaking rationally, people are going to jump in and do that, right? And what they don't do is speak to that emotional side. They don't motivate that elephant. If that elephant wants to go right down that path, it's going to go right. It doesn't matter what the man on top wants to do. So if that athlete, you tell them that they should be drinking water and they want to drink that big Coke or that Bud Light, they're going to drink the Bud Light if the emotional side is where they want to be. And you have to tap into that emotion and find a way. So it wasn't just about winning with a team that hasn't won in 20 years, right? It was togetherness. I mean, out of those 52 or the 78 players, we didn't lose anybody. They all wanted to be there. And so we had to tap into that. And then that's the third part of that is the situational world, or that you have to remove obstacles. So there's a lot of obstacles that were in place, a lot of people that were in place that didn't believe in them. They weren't set up for success, and so you had to remove some of those things for them to have success. So little things like the strength coach before me is a great guy, did his best. It wasn't we didn't do anything better or worse or those types of things, but they had a problem of guys showing up late or not showing up at all for workouts, right? That was a barrier. And so their solution was to create 8 different lift times, and they would have 8 lift groups, right? And so now they had no excuse to not make a lift. And what would happen is those players would be, they'd be sitting there, and one buddy was, sitting in his underwear eating freaking cornflakes watching TV, and his other roommate was in his room with his girlfriend. And both of those things sounded better than going and getting their butt kicked at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. in the freezing cold, right? So we just made it. There was 2 groups. We took the decision process out, and one group lifted and one group met, and all their friends were in the building, and we just flipped it. And we didn't have, and it took a day, and we didn't have any problems with guys not showing up anymore.
Well, it's the issue you run into, and having obviously been in that situation as a young kid, almost like and we see this with my own kids, the least amount of decisions I can put up to them, and just give the voluntold, like, hey, there's no decisions, like, hey, you're going to wear this is what you're having for lunch, because if you give them an opportunity to have input on the decisions, nothing will get done, and we will waste a ton of time. And I always think thank God when I went to college, hey, this is what you're going to do. And I don't really remember me having a lot of opportunity for decision other than hey, what major am I going to teach? Right. We had to be there, this. And there was a very, well, at least I perceived it. And I think back on this now, I perceived it as it was very cut or dry. You're either there, you're not, and you're in trouble if you're not. And as I got older, I realized that certain players depended on who you were, and this is pretty awful at Cal. I don't think it's this way anymore, but the certain players, the higher the level of the player, or dependent on how they recruited you or whatever, certain guys had more, I guess you could say, latitude than other people. We had a really demanding taskmaster as a coach, and there was no bullshit. You either show up, you do it, or you're fucking out of there. And then all of a sudden I come to find out that there's that's not how it is for everybody. And I remember thinking thank God I wasn't a young guy with opportunity or knew that I could fucking bullshit. Because a bunch of those guys that were, not doing what they needed to do, and coaches kind of let them slide for whatever reason, ended up not graduating and not playing. And then all the guys that were pretty switched on ended up graduating and going on and playing in the NFL. It's, I remember as a young guy, I remember sitting around the dorms with all these guys, and every single person in that room there, other than me, was, and this is funny, was oh, I'm just here to go to the NFL. What about you? I'm I don't know anybody who went to NFL. I don't really like to watch it. I just want to get this degree, and I got to play football for a free degree. I'm I'm fucking in. And and all those guys that were just hyper focused on going to the NFL, fucking not. I don't remember. I didn't graduate with a single one of them, and not one of them. Maybe one of the dudes got a chance to go play in the NFL. And it's such an interesting thing, and especially for I've told this guy this like a million times that the worst thing you can do is give an 18 to 22-year-old kid this opportunity because they don't have enough they don't have enough information, they don't have enough experience, they just don't have enough age to realize the opportunity that they have. And it's not until they're like 36 or 40 years old that they realize like, oh, I really fucked that up.
Right.
You know?
Well, there's such a big difference, you know, especially nowadays with, you know, again, you don't want to sound like a crotchety old man, right? But
no, you can do it. I totally love it.
With social media and all the bullshit that kind of comes with, the kind of the self-promotion and whatnot, is there really is a problem with delusion, right? People are delusional and they have to feel like they have to put on this kind of fake face in front. And I think the conversation or the art of having the difficult conversation it's becoming a lost art, you know, and all the great coaches that John, you had and I've had, and the guys that we all know together. I mean, the guys that were great at getting those players to buy in were the ones that, you know, didn't put up with the bullshit and defined good. You know, when you define good, it doesn't, you know, as a coach, I want every single one of my players to go to the NFL, every single one of them. You know, and I could be that dream killer and see that young kid come in and be like, man, you're just not good. You're just not going to be good enough. I know in 4 years, I know what you're going to become. You're not going to be good enough. But what I would always do is I would be that dream builder. I wouldn't say you couldn't do it, because if you would have told me that I wasn't going to ever make it in the NFL as an NAIA college football player, you would have told me that, I would have cut you off.
Where'd you play your college ball?
I played at Ottawa, a little small school in Kansas.
Okay.
You know, but I thought, just like everybody, I thought.
I knew a bunch of NAA guys. Jermaine Mayberry played at A&M Kingsville, and so I knew a fairly decent amount of guys that came out of there, and it just was this deal where, you know, hey, it doesn't matter where you come from, can you do the job?
Yeah,
at least it was like that.
For you to try out with the Chiefs. I mean, I had a chance, but I wasn't good enough, you know. But if you would have told me that, I would have written you off, you know. But what I try to do with my players is I try to define good. I'd take those NFL Combine standards and I would say, hey, look, you know, you're saying you want to go to the NFL, great. The average vertical jump is 32, you know, at linebacker or whatever it is, or, you know, defensive end really probably for that. And you're at 18. So we got a little work to do, you know, and who now what happens now is, instead of me being the guy that's the guy that makes you uncomfortable every time you walk into the weight room, I now become the only guy in the building that can help you reach your goals. You know, if your goal is to go to the NFL, now I'm the only guy in the building that can help you do that. And so when you're dicking around at the water cooler, I can go over there and I don't have to just freaking cuss you out, but I can sit there and say, hey man, didn't you tell me that your goal was to go to the NFL? If that was your goal, then, you know, do you think that sitting over here at the water cooler dancing is helping you get, you know, increase that vertical, that bench, or that 40 or whatever it may be? And just having those difficult conversations. But I mean, to your point, John, I think you've got early on, especially whenever you take over a situation, or early on in the year when you've lost that senior class, or you're redefining your team, you have to be coach-led. You can't be player-led, and you have to take the ambiguity out of the decision-making process. I mean, my wife just bought a car that, you know, not too long ago, and we're sitting there and I'm like, you can get whichever car you want. It doesn't matter. Right. And we got it narrowed down to the same car, but a black and a white one. And she picked the black one. I'm like, are you sure? She's like, yeah, I'm absolutely sure. So we drive off the damn lot, and like a block later, she's like, oh man, I should have got the white one.
No, you know why? Because it shows the dirt more. The black car always shows the dirt.
No, man, but it looks good.
Yeah, only when it's clean. Yeah, it's true.
That decision, that you know, there's always anxiety with a decision-making process, you know. And so when you got those young athletes, or those athletes that can't push for themselves, you have to take that. You have to remove that barrier. You have to take that barrier out of their situational world, so that they can have some success.
Where did, not to change you up a little bit, but where did you run into Rafael Ruiz? I saw Raf speaking at one of your play events coming up.
Yeah, so Rafa and
I was laughing, thinking, you know, you pulled old Rafael Ruiz out. I mean, Raf's fucking. I always joke, dude. Raf, and I know he's not listening to this, so I'll say it. He's probably the best strength coach that people will be like, "Who is that guy?"
Yeah, right.
You know, I'm always like, man, like it's
freaking Yoda, man. You don't know about him.
Yeah, no, dude, I met Rolf when I was 23 years old, and I thought he was 40, and he turned out he was 25, which I still laugh about. But yeah, I mean, I've almost 20 years I've known Rolf, and still one of the best in the business.
Yeah, Raph and I were same age, and I was an intern for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then I became a part-time assistant. And Raph would help us out with training camp, and so he would come in, and we it was a traditional high intensity training program, one set to failure, and for training camps and camp situations, we would set up a line and you would just go right down the line. And so
this was the Eagles for us, man, with Mike Wolf. It was one set to failure, 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, you pick whichever one. And so, Raph would come in and he would run one of the stations, and usually he was right next to me because my name was Ron and his name was Raph. And we would sit there and talk. And what I always appreciated about him was he, I was a young coach, and I think every young coach goes through this, where I grew up training with Istvan Javorek and the Javorek complexes and weightlifting and competed in weightlifting. And that's what I did through college. And then I get to the NFL and I'm like, well, shit, it's the NFL, right? They're doing something right. And they were doing traditional high intensity. So I basically kind of flipped my script and said, okay, well, this makes sense too, right? And Raph, as long as I've known him, that dude he just challenges the status quo. He will not settle for just a blanket answer. He's always going to go and kind of push the envelope. And he would do that, and it would piss off our head strength coach. But I also respected it, and he always did it in a respectful way. And, but it was also like, here's a kid. I mean, we're 22 years old at the time. Here's a kid challenging a guy that's been in the NFL for 16 years, and basically, like, I know it as much as you do, and which that part of it, I was like, man, I kind of cringe a little bit, but to see what that guy's done through his career, and you're right. I mean, he's one of the best kept secrets in strength and conditioning.
Yeah, if he could have just played better, and I always joke with him, I'm like, Rolf, if you could have just played better with others.
Play nice.
He would have been like a head strength coach at so many different places. And the hilarious part is all of Rolf's interns have since gone on and become like head strength coaches. So it's just, I love Rolf. And, but man, he, too much, but I love him, dude. I always think like someday I'll be able to unite forces with him again, but it's that challenging the status quo, right? In certain spaces, you kind of got to stick to the script. Yeah. I mean, we taught together for years with when I was doing the CrossFit gig, and like, it was, Rolf gets up there and he's trying to teach like, PhD master's type stuff. And I'm like, yo, man, we're just teaching fire to cavemen. Yeah, right. Like, we're still trying to convince CrossFitters that putting a periodized strength template into a training program will reap dividends over randomly applying strength principles that that aren't really principles, that are just kind of ad hoc. And I remember Rolf being like, I'm like, dude, we're just teaching firemen to make cavemen to make fire, bro. Like, we don't have to get into quantum mechanics. And I just it's pretty interesting when you really think of the strength and conditioning world in terms of digestion. Everybody wants to teach at the top of the bell curve because those athletes and that information is the most jiggy shit. And for the most part, it's like I had a guy hit me up the other day and he was like, what about incline concentration flies for building upper chest? And I was like, okay, so after you bench press heavy and maybe do heavy incline for 20 years, right, and you've done thousands of reps and you want to define maybe your upper clavicle muscle in terms of physique development, but have you done the body work on the front side? And it's probably, everybody always wants to go to the super jiggy stuff, and it's the compound basics, and I did that high intensity stuff. And ironically, when I'd come out of Todd Rice's program, which was snatch, clean and jerk, Oli based strength program, and then I go to the Eagles with Wolfie and those guys who were Penn State cats, and we're in this high intensity deal. And the crazy part is, I got way stronger. And it was because I would actually go through the line. I would go through all 3 lines every day. I'd get down in 12 minutes. I'd be like, can we do the other one? They'd be like, yeah, sure. And I'd just load that shit up and do accentuated negatives and a bunch of stuff. And I got stronger probably because it was just a different adaptation. But the other thing, and this is and you know this dealing in the NFL, is when you have the best players in the world, it doesn't really matter what you do. They're probably going to get better. Great. And so that's why, like, whenever we have like NFL strength coaches come out, or, you know, you hear them present or whatever, I'm like, yo, man, like, go to like Eastern Michigan and put your program in and get those guys all to the NFL or this, or, you know, go to a community college and, you know, get these guys ready. You know, if you're at like, you know, a playoff team every year in the NFL, and you have, you know, the salary cap and to be able to go out and get the best, I'm pretty sure whatever you put in play is going to get people ready. So,
right. Yeah, I think there's no doubt about it. I think, to me, philosophies and strength and conditioning they're just interpretations, right? And I think, you know, every interpretation has a place in the development process. I think what strength coaches fail to realize is that if they identify with something because of their own personal training. So where they're at in their own development or their own maturation, maybe triphasics working for them, or maybe, you know, 5-3-1's working for them, or maybe it's cube method or whatever it is, right? It's working for them. So they adopt that, and that's what they try to impose on their athletes, as opposed to looking at it and saying, I agree with you 100%, John. I mean, with my freshmen and sophomores, they were going to do a high intensity program because I needed to put size and mass on them and strength. And, you know, now I would combine that, what we didn't always do in the NFL with those guys, is with a really solid movement program, you know, to support that. Right. But there is no better way to develop size and strength and mass than, you know, just true hypertrophy and go into momentary muscular fatigue, you know. And then now you start to add the speed component, the dynamic component, and you start to develop some of those more athletic based type skills, you know. But I think so many times we focus on what's right for us and what's not. I think, you know, one thing that, you know, not to go back to Raph, you know, too much, but one thing that I think that he does is he looks at it as a 360 degree type of athlete, 360 degree approach. And, you know, it's more of the asking the questions and focusing on the deficiencies than it is saying, okay, here's your cut and paste program, go to work.
Yeah, Rob's deal was more very similar. Like, he was more interested in what you can't do. And he's like, I know what you can do. Here's what you can't do. And when you can do what you can't do, then all of a sudden what you do is better. And I remember, like, he said that to me, and I'm like, that makes no fucking sense. And he's like, 60% of the time works every time. But I remember the training got super varied. Like, I remember when I got to the point where I could just do everything, like, all of a sudden we were like, he's like, hey, let's go to the pool. And we brought a bunch of 45-pound plates to the pool. And we were like holding the plates in the bottom of the pool, trying to jump, like, you know, 10 feet up and drive the plates out. And I remember, like, what's this one? And he's like, well, we're working on, you know, holding our breath and, you know, hypoxic states. And he went through all this shit. And then finally, like, listened to him, like, you just wanted to do something fucking hard. He's like, yeah, in a different environment. And he's like, it's something fun to change the training and this. And that was what was so cool about the training was every year when I would go and I would come back, I would always, as we started doing stuff, I'm like, well, what about that stuff we used to do? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, how come we don't do that anymore? He's like, you can do it. He's like, believe me, like, the day that you can do something, like, it's not as if you lost that skill. We just have to find different ways to challenge it. Like, I remember I got like 10 pull-ups with like 90 pounds between my waist. And I came in the next week and he had unbolted the pull-up structure. So I jumped up there and the whole thing almost fucking tipped on me. And I was like, dude, it's unbolted. He's like, yeah, we're going to find a way to make it harder. And so then I had to, like, somehow stabilize his fucking pull-up structure to do pull-ups. And sure enough, like, there was, and then that's when we got into accentuated negatives and like pre-fatiguing. And he's like, man, he goes, the problem is that everybody has this traditional model for overload. Like, hey, if you can do 90, let's try to do 100 and this. He was like, once we got to a point, we had to go back and find new ways to challenge. And I remember those training experiences, really, I mean, between, you know, what Todd Rice did with like kind of the class goalie stuff, and then what I had before with Zengus, and then Roth, and then what I, the Charlie Francis of the world and all the other people I trained with, really formulated what you see here in Power Athlete, in that there's a non-linear approach to this stuff. I mean, there's a point at which, you know, the straight line is the best way to go. But when you get to the point where you have to, until it ends, and then you have to find different ways to attack this stuff. And, dude, it was, when I think back on that training, there's a few things I'm upset about. One is that we didn't have cell phones the way they are today with like cameras and video and all that, because there was so much amazing shit. Like we had a group of about 15 or 20 NFL guys that showed up and trained every day. You know, Jeff Mitchell, Ed Muitalo, myself, John McLaughlin. I mean, all these guys that were high level NFL guys all showed up and trained. There was no video. We didn't have we never called a video dude to come take it. We didn't tape anything. Like Roth wrote it down. I don't even remember sets and reps or nothing. I just am extremely upset. And then second of all, the fact that I didn't have a website to post some of the information to keep as a diary. I wrote stuff down in my journals but then when I moved from Tampa, I don't know what the hell happened to all that stuff. Right. I actually lost it in a flood when my downstairs in Kansas City flood. My sump pump went out, and there was a big rain, and we got shot by lightning, and the whole thing shut down, and it flooded my lower my basement, and I lost everything. But that, I just remembered that nonlinear approach, or finding ways to challenge athletes in non-conventional ways, really just became the foundation of a lot of what we do. And still to this day, when I see what Roth is doing, he's looking for new ways to challenge people in non-conventional ways.
When you look at, that's the difference right now. So, most of my career has been spent working with elite football, but what I'm doing now is I'm working with Olympic level athletes and professional rugby players and around the world, and so I had to go back through that whole needs analysis and really figure out what's going to work for these guys in sports that I wasn't familiar with. And really didn't put a lot of value in, but you want to talk about a pain cave, go do a 2,000 meter row on in a boat on a lake, right? That's about as painful as it gets, and you look at elite athletes, the difference between, the next tier down, so that elite college football player or that non-draft pick or whatever it is, isn't some of the physical attributes, it really is their ability to adapt, to different stimuluses, both mentally and physically, and so I think where a lot of coaches miss the boat, especially why a lot of coaches hate going to the NFL when they get there, they think they want to get there because of the t-shirt, right? But then they get there and they're like, oh man, this sucks. They don't want to work, or they don't want to do this, or they don't want to do that. And the challenge of getting them to buy into something and really, and to want to work hard, that manipulation kind of takes place. And manipulation has a negative connotation, but it's positive. And if your intent is good, that part of it that's the fun part, and so with those elite athletes, it's first showing them some success, right? You're getting a more informed consumer. They've had success with something. So you have to give them familiarity and let them see some success, but then it's challenge. Then you got to be like, oh man, I don't want you doing that because I don't think you can do that yet. Oh, bullshit. I'll go do that right now. And all of a sudden it's this game that you play to get them to try new adaptations. And when you do it that way, man, those guys they're phenomenal.
Can you talk about your first coaching experience internationally? Because I imagine those are extremely highly effective athletes, but they're not very trained. So they can do amazing things, but then when we ask them to do basic barbell stuff, it's new to them. So talk about that first assumptions that you went into your international coaching gigs.
Yeah, the first time I coached anybody internationally was in NFL Europe, and we had 5 German players that were on the roster. So we had a elite soccer player that played in the Bundesliga. That was a kicker that freaking had a panic. We'd have to knock him out to get on the plane, and would have a panic attack every time we were getting on and off. We had the top 300 meter dash winners for the German national team on the roster, and I messed those guys up. These guys were elite sprinters, and I was trying to make them football players and doing hypertrophy type stuff. But I think now, to answer your question a little bit now, I really have to go in, and that's where what you guys do and with your methodology and really looking at and defining athleticism and what the sport specific demands are, really is what's super smart. Because that's essentially what I had to do. I had to go and I had to watch a rowing regatta, and then turn around and have to get in the boat and actually do it, and then feel it, and then start to figure out, okay, man, when I woke up, I felt like shit here, and here. How do I fix that? And then how do I, how do I keep my wind? How do I keep my posture? And how do I keep my balance? And those were the things that were important in the boat, which wouldn't have been things that I would have thought of as a strength coach going into a weight room and just saying, here we go, and then I've gotten, in the last, I never had hobbies, going through my coaching career. But now that I've actually have a little bit of time when I'm home, I've really gotten into mountain biking and jiu-jitsu, and so going through it in jiu-jitsu as a 43-year-old man, it's like I'm having to figure out how my body works in that environment and what feels good, what doesn't, how do I need to prep? I mean, I'm at the gym 30 minutes before just prepping so I don't hurt myself in the first 5 minutes. So I think, to answer your question, I think it really comes down to, I think you have to experience it to some degree, and I think you have to watch it, and then a trained eye can put together a good program, I think.
I remember years ago I got reached out to by Aussie Rules football team. We had worked with rugby league, rugby union guys all the time, and which is a very similar demand for football. And I remember I got reached out to by one of our coaches in our network who was working with, I want to say like not their top level, but like one of the their feeder teams. And I remember him shooting me a bunch of video, and then also like these petameters of like how many meters and kilometers they were running during game and in practice. And I want to say it was like 12K they were running during a game, and they were running anywhere from like 10 to 25K during a practice. And like it was just it blew my fucking mind the amount of running these guys were doing. And then he sends me like the program that they had been following. It was like 3 sets of 8 to 12 to 15 reps, and it was like 20 exercises, and it was like this really shitty kind of light to medium volume, high volume, like dumbbell bodybuilding training program. And I remember just scratching my head and being like, you guys are probably like the highest level endurance athlete I've ever seen, because like not only is it like an amazing amount of volume of running, but like it's high intensity running. Like they're running like a 200 to 400 meter sprint, and as anybody knows, like the toughest, the toughest competition that I've ever seen is the 800 meters. Like people that run the 800 meters are sadists. Like they want to hurt themselves, they want to hurt others. And I actually dated a girl who was an 800 meter runner, so I have
Sounds lovely.
Yeah, it takes a certain mindset, and that's the mindset these guys were in. And I remember when he sent me all this information, and I thought about it, and I basically sent him this like single, double, and triple, kind of like rep max deal, and they were doing some speed work, but with like a lot of plyos, and everything was like less than 5 reps. I want to say like maybe like 2 or 3 compound movements, and then, basically a ton of jumping and, some unilateral type movements just as an accessory. And I remember he calls me and we get on Skype, and he's like, dude, I'm going to get fired if I show him this. This is completely contrary to everything that's taught within our sports science system. And I'm like, yeah, man, this is what I would do. Submit it and see what they say. So he submits it. They almost fire him, but he somehow talks him into letting him do it. And then all of a sudden their injury rate went from like 30% down to like 3%. And they won their, whole deal this year. And he gets, carried off. And, this guy's, presenting and going through this whole thing.
He's coming out to Texas. He shot me an email. I got to fucking respond to him.
Yeah, no. And, dude, he was like, man, like what were, can you explain to me your mindset behind this? And I remember looking at it and being like, dude, there's energy systems associated with athletes. And the problem is if you're constantly going to the same pool all the time, and your training pool is there, like you guys are never challenging posture and position, with full range of motion movements under a load that'll necessarily drive adaptation. And if speed's the goal, I mean, dude, you guys are getting so much conditioning and so much running in your sport. Why do you have to do that in the weight room? And, like that type of mentality to just go against the grain and do stuff. It seems intuitive to us. I just remember that, most of the strength and conditioning in the world stems from NFL football. And, Australia and Europe is really getting into this almost like practitioner sports scientist as a coach. And it's pretty fascinating with the amount of research those guys are doing. But, research is only good if you know how to apply it. I always go back to the NSAA thing where they were measuring VO2 maxes on shrimp. They built like underwater treadmills, and then we're measuring VO2 max of shrimp with little backpacks.
Well, you are what you eat. So fit shrimp, right?
I don't eat shrimp.
Well, let's cancel the podcast. I finally did it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the end of it. But like that type of stuff, man. And it's like you said, man, like to get in the boat and to have done the sport. I always tell people, I'm like, man, if you're going to program something or you're going to ask an athlete to do it, you better have at least walked a mile in their shoes. And you better that's why I think we've had such success with a lot of our programs in that we actually do this stuff. And like we had a workout today and people were asking me how to game it. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to game it. This is how I'm going to do it. And they're like, you're doing this? I'm like, yeah, what do you think? I'm going to fucking not let you guys do it?
I did not do it.
Yeah.
I did some squats and sprints, and it's called shrimp fit. It took about 45 seconds. I could get it in there.
Well, it was funny. Luke went out and run, and he came in. He's like, I'm so fucking out of shape.
Oh, man. I've been
plugging holes,
dealing with a hip, just big drama hip guy. But I
thought you were a neck guy.
Neck guy. I'm a hip neck guy. And then I was an ankle guy for a while. I just got, even the Mona Lisa falls apart, right? But I had 6 up-talls and falls with a 5-step start, and I'm like, I'm fucking roasted. It was bad.
It was pretty bad. Ron, you and I talked about experience and coaching experience in that international opportunity that your guys are going through. It's amazing because there's top-level athletes that no way, as a United States strength coach, you can touch right at their level of experience, but internationally you get exposed the opportunity to work with high-level soccer, sprint, any sport internationally, right? So talk to us, expand on that opportunity. How did you get contacted to start empowering these coaches, and what it encompasses, this whole opportunity, and kind of a sale for young coaches to get the hell out of here, stop living that intern dream and go international.
Ooh, so yeah, what a great idea.
Well, I think it's exactly what I wanted to do when I left. I think ultimately the world is shrinking, like we said. I think there's so much opportunity because in the United States, there's a tremendous amount of resources and attention thrown towards strength and conditioning, and combine that with the university system and the whole deal. You got some really developed coaches typically. I think we are lagging a little bit in the science, in terms of Australia and the UK and how they've integrated research into a practical situation. So, I mean, I walked into the Brisbane Broncos, and in their staff office, they have 8 research posters of 8 research studies that they've done for the last 8 years of questions that they've had about their team and how they were testing that, going through the scientific process and getting the answer and then sharing that, for the community. We're not doing that in the United States. Now, where they are excelling in the science, they're lacking in that art of coaching and creating environments and creating atmosphere and supporting it and all those types of things. So it's shrinking and those types of things. But to your point, I mean, the university system is different here than it is around the world. And most of sports, they go into an academy system where you're working with elite athletes from when they're 8 years old, U8s, all the way up to the Olympic level athletes. And if you can get into that, because if you have that experience leading a group and leading in that type of environment, there is a tremendous amount of opportunity for American strength coaches abroad, to work with some pretty phenomenal athletes across the board. And so how it came about for me is, I just kept my ears open. I think that's where strength coaches, you get so blocked, side burner or side blinders to what you're focused on 100%. And the fact of the matter is this, I mean, it's not that difficult to write programs for athletes in a college setting. It's not that difficult to implement. I mean, we make it harder than this. The difficult part, if you're good, is you're spending time with your athletes, and that'll hijack your time quite a bit. But what you prioritize, you make happen. And so if you prioritize being a professional and returning emails and phone calls and and looking for opportunity outside the 4 walls of the weight room, you're going to find it. And so I just kept my eyes open every time I ran into an international, somebody that had international experience. I would ask questions. And at one point when I got strength coach of the year, there was a group of Chinese, strength coaches that came over to the NSCA, And I just introduced myself. And talked to them, and then I accepted the awards. That didn't hurt things, right? I stayed in contact and went and spoke over in China, and that led long term to a relationship to be able to put coaches over there. But even now, I mean, I just right before I got on this, I was talking to a strength coach in Malaysia. I'm going to be traveling over to Malaysia to work with his gym that works with 50% of the Malaysian Olympic athletes. And I think to me, that's cool. I think that's what it's all about, right?
100%, man. I mean, and having traveled with our gig, and probably even working with the coaches that come up through our system, not a lot of people have traveled like that and have been able to work in different cultures. And I think we just talked about it with Brett Bartholomew, didn't we?
Yeah.
About getting some reps in different cultures. And the importance of that in the coach's journey. I mean, what an opportunity.
I remember when I was in Germany for a seminar, we reached out to I got connected with one of the local soccer organizations that was a professional, and they had this whole feeder system that was started like 8 years old. And there was this great belief that actually lifting weights reduced their ability to progress in. So they had like a deal where they weren't even talking about weightlifting until these kids were like 16 or 17 or 18, because they thought it would, hinder their growth and hinder their abilities. And they were more focused on like development of skill in this. And I remember thinking like, oh man, you guys, like there's a huge thing. And like, I think that's the one thing that America is usually a little head on, is the idea that, it's not going to stunt your growth, and that you can put some sport performance stuff in even at a young age and progress them. So, I mean, we see it here all the time in Texas, man. Every place has got a sport specific training facility, which, at the end of the day, like there is a need for skilled development, but like, it's different. So.
I think the culture, you talked about the culture piece, Luke, and I think you talk about like the Chinese culture, where they don't value women as maybe as much as we do in the United States, or there's not as much, I shouldn't say value, but there's not as much equal opportunity for female athletes, and having to go into that type of setting and figure out, okay, how do we work around this, and how do we even support this with maybe a female strength coach at some point. I think there's a big world out there, and what's great about, not to make this kind of political, right? But, politically, there's it's a lot of messed up things going on in the world, right? But sport seems to be one of the biggest unifiers, on the planet, and so, yeah, we might be really at odds with China, which we are right now to some degree. But it doesn't limit me from traveling to and from and impacting those athletes. And what happens is those athletes go on to be a part of the political climate in some capacity. And so I know, again, it seems far-fetched when people hear it, but you make a change, you affect change in this world, one action, one person at a time. And I think we have an obligation to do that, and sport is one of the greatest catalysts for that to happen.
For sure. Let's talk about sport and opportunity in creating. So I've picked up your book here, and you introduce the first lead in is your story about when you were an athlete and you had a coach come in for the first time, and I believe it was your junior year, rising senior, and talk about the mind shift that changed in you as an athlete with this coach and what led you to write this book.
Yeah, Coach Creighton, Chris Creighton is now the head strength coach or head football coach at Eastern Michigan, and that's who I ended up leaving the Bengals to go work with, and a lot of it is because I told my wife that if he ever got a job at Division I level, I was leaving where I was at to go work for him. He's that kind of coach, and he got hired as a 26-year-old head football coach my senior year in college, and we had gone 1-9 my junior year, one of the worst years of my life, and just I was having a hard time with it. I was leading the off-season workouts. We didn't hire him until like February, I think. So I was leading the off-season workouts, and I was taking on that type of leadership role. I was even on the hiring committee for when we hired him. And it didn't look like they were going to go with him, and I freaking stood up and had all the athletes that were in it, I had them walk out and say that we weren't playing if they didn't freaking hire Creighton. And it was one of those deals right now. I think they were going to hire him anyways, but I made it kind of sound dramatic anyways. But one of the very first day that we had an off-season workout, it was 6 a.m. and we're all sitting down and we're doing old school calisthenics. Now he's not a strength coach, but he's a really good football coach. And we're doing old school calisthenics and stretching. And while we were stretching, he read the story of John Goddard, who's this kind of modern day Indiana Jones. And when he was, I think, 15 years old, he wrote this incredible list of goals of things that he wanted to accomplish in his life. And it wasn't like someday I hope to be a pro or something. It was like, I'm going to go explore all 7 continents. I'm going to climb these 15 mountains. I'm going to go take pictures of these rare animals on these different continents and whatnot. And it was just an incredible list that, I mean, I'd be embarrassed to show my list, but I remember as a young athlete, the impact that story had on me as a player. And so that night I went home and I wrote a list and I had it tacked on my college board. And then I rewrote it several times through the years. And now it's an Evernote on my phone of things that I want to accomplish in my life. And I still have that list 25 years later, and I'm still checking things off. In fact, this past weekend, one of the things I wanted to go do was see Stonehenge. And I went to Stonehenge while I was in England just this last weekend, so it's nice. Something I get to check off. But, that process of storytelling, the great coaches are great teachers and great teachers are great storytellers, and there's nothing I love more as a coach than the 5 minutes before a workout or the 5 minutes after a workout when you get to talk to your players about being a better human being. And if you can, again, tap into that emotional side, you can tap into that elephant and help them find the feeling that comes with that. Storytelling being a phenomenal way to do that, you can really affect some change in some athletes' lives. So you go back to that experience at Eastern and walking in there. I mean, I would tell them stories. I'd put my arm around it. I'd spend time outside the weight room. And you would be amazed how many athletes would walk back into my office throughout those other 22 hours. And they'd be like, Coach, man, that story this morning, that really struck a chord. Or what did you mean by that, Coach? Or, can you write that down so I can send that to my mom or, whatever. And those are the opportunities when you have that's what makes doing the 3 sets of 10 easy. It's when you can get a player to believe in you outside of the workout, and you invest in the athlete outside of the workout. That makes the coaching part the easy part. And so I felt like in this book, when I grew up, there was the old Chicken Soup for the Soul books. You guys remember those? And they had a Chicken Soup for the Sports Fan Soul. And that was one of my favorite books. It was just a collection of those kind of metaphorical stories. And I love that. I felt like coaches probably had stories like that they used as well. So I reached out to, ended up being 99 other coaches and got their stories that they use, some of the stories that they use, and put it into a collection, almost like a daily devotion for coaches to be able to use. And it's stuff that I use with my kids. It's stuff that I use with athletes. It's stuff that I use in the everyday to just simply motivate people. But again, we all have an obligation to help people become the best version of themselves. And I think storytelling is one of the best ways to do that.
And we got a lot of Power Athlete Radio alums that you tapped. So I now have my list that I need to continue to tackle and almost have my own goal list of getting every single one of these authors onto our show. Not all of them.
It's been a lot. So,
yeah. But
so that's how you
60% of the time.
You're having McKeefery do all the heavy lifting.
Well, I see you have Mike Boyle in here.
Yeah, Mike Boyle, Mike Hill.
Mike Boyle was a good
Brett Bartholomew.
You got to reconnect with him.
He makes me laugh because, man, we had him on the podcast and he was like super level-headed, but yet like he is such a fucking like rabble rouser, like controversy guy on social media, you know, and these like blanket statements of like, you know, nobody should be back squatting. But yeah, when we had him on, he's like, well, you know, I work with these like, you know, older, you know, professional hockey guys and they can't squat. So I like to do, you know, a lot of single leg work, and that makes sense. But yet he makes these like definitive blanket comments.
I've never heard the term rabble rouser, but I get it.
Do you know what rabble?
Oh yeah, South Park.
The Texas coming out of them already.
What's that?
It's the Texas coming out of you already.
Oh yeah. Rabble rouser is a Texas term.
Is that
It makes sense that Tex wouldn't know.
yeah?
It's the Southern.
Because you're a fake Texan.
Hey John, where were you born?
Stop.
I was born in California.
Oh yeah, I was born in Illinois.
Then you moved here as quick as you could.
No, it took me 40 years to get here.
Tex,
Yeah,
where
it's
were
pretty
you
slow.
born?
Yeah. You're aren't you a Virginia guy?
Circumstances
you're
outside
a
of my
Yankee.
control.
You're a Yankee.
I'm below the Mason-Dixon line, John.
No, it's true. Actually, surprisingly, I didn't really know where the Mason-Dixon line was until I was in Philly and we rode to Delaware and crossed over the Mason-Dixon line. And I remember thinking like, wow, this is way, I mean, you think Mason-Dixon line's going to be in the South? Like,
Well,
that
no,
was
Maryland's the free state nickname.
Yeah, that was, blew my mind. There's a Waffle House right on the Mason-Dixon line we used to ride down, me and El Bundabente.
Still never been.
That's one of the tourist stops.
To
Yeah.
the Mason-Dixon line or the Waffle House?
Or the Waffle House. Oh, you would love
The Waffle House on the Mason-Dixon
First of
line.
all,
Yeah.
as much as
Bring
you
it.
love shitty coffee,
Bring it. Yeah.
the Waffle House has the market cornered on coffee
Shitty
that will
coffee.
give you a fucking ulcer if you drink it.
No, not me. Let me tell you. Let me clarify for the listeners. One, I don't love shitty coffee. I love good coffee, even the fancy stuff. But I do enjoy sipping all-you-can-drink coffee out of a diner mug. I just don't know what there is about it. Like,
But no, I think it's
have a
the
scrambler.
Telling stories with your friends, drinking shitty coffee. I think it's the stories you love, and you just happen to
Probably.
be.
I just hate shitty coffee.
Man, I'll tell you, there's one spot there's only one spot that has pretty good mugs.
Is it in Fort Bragg?
No, dude, fucking Los Pinos has the word. I cannot.
Oh,
drink
no, it's
coffee,
awful.
Man. It tastes like,
Like brown water
dirt.
with dirt?
yeah, and maybe a little acid, like dirt and acid. And it shocks me because it's the right type of mug, it's the right type of scenario.
But best breakfast tacos in all of, I guess, West Austin area.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's up there.
On Bee Cave.
They're amazing.
On that street.
On that street. Yeah, because when you start talking about breakfast tacos here in Austin, there's way better places than the Los Pinos.
Okay, list them.
I don't
Exactly. All right.
I don't know. I got kids. I don't go out. I'm not like out driving around all willy-nilly looking for breakfast tacos, even though we did go out.
Right?
Yeah, we did go to this place downtown. I took Cashy. We went to some place downtown. I had to wait in line for like 30 minutes to get these things, and they were pretty good, but I can't remember the name. I can't even remember your name half the time. You know how many hits I've had to that?
12.
1,000.
7 miles an hour.
12,000 hits.
Anything else, Tex?
Yeah. Highlight this, the PLAE Pro app. So you're going directly to coaches for the education where they're getting the rest of their information. Might as well learn something, right?
Yeah, no, it's the app was something that came about. I created something similar to this a long time ago where I was trying to kind of collect all these videos from these different clinics that would exist and kind of put it behind a membership site or whatever. And I really enjoyed it because it was something that I really did it for me so I could just kind of do a clinic on my own terms, right? But when we went about, we were doing our events, we were sitting on a ton of content that we had either produced ourselves or had access to. And, it was kind of dying. It was one-off type stuff and it was dying. Some of this gold content that needed to be out there. So we created a PLAE Pro platform. It's both a web-based and, app-based platform, but it's essentially Netflix for strength coaches. It's got a ton of old, content from different labs and clinics that we've held. But we have a TV show that I put on. It's called Beyond the Chalk, where I interviewed, came down to Austin and did Donnie Mabe. And, we just got done doing Tom Morris at Indiana, who's a quadriplegic or paraplegic strength coach at Indiana and practicing strength coach. Just finding strength coaches that have cool stories. And we have an Iron Roots podcast with Zach Evadesh, where he talks about some of the history of strength and conditioning. And
Old school.
So much of more content.
So whenever Zach says anything, I just yell at him, old school. I don't know why.
Well, it's your Evanesh voice.
It's my Evanesh voice. Yeah, it's good.
That's awesome. But yeah, I mean, we ended up putting it all into this platform that, it's essentially like Netflix. And the idea is just to make it so it's at your fingertips,
I think it's great to go out and chronicle, especially these kind of storied strength coaches. And I know this is going to sound like extremely fucking, I don't know, weird, but there's a lot of this information that unfortunately when these guys pass on is just kind of left to this, folklore. Like, Dr. Ken just passed away.
Charlie Francis.
Yeah, Charlie Francis. But also I was thinking the dude from Hawaii who wrote the, Only Strong Shall Survive. The strength. Fuck. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name.
Dar? What time did you say?
Hauser.
No. The guy that wrote Only the Strong Shall Survive. The guy from Hawaii. Fuck.
I'm not going to be a help here.
Yeah, I don't have my computer in front of me. But all these kind of old time strength coaches that were so steep in the game early on, and then they since pass away, and you really lose a bunch of that good information. So it's been great. I mean, I always regretted not getting George Zangus on the podcast. I mean, thank God I got my dad on before he passed away. But some of these people that were have such great information in these stories, and we're so into it. And that's what Zach is great about, is really chronicling this stuff. I love seeing Zach's Instagram just because he'll post things, and I'm like, oh shit! He sent me that a series of videos from Dr. Ken that are just unbelievable. Legend. You guys know him, Dr. Ken Lacer? No.
Maniac.
Dude, unbelievable. He used to train to classical music. He had this a crazy garage gym, and all these NFL players would show up. I mean, just pretty. And I think he lived out in Long Island. Pretty storied dude. But I mean, I just think if somebody doesn't chronicle it or write down the stories or do what you've done, then they're just kind of lost to time. And and that's not going to influence future strength coaches or people that really need it.
Well, I think I talk about this often on my podcast and when I speak and whatnot. And we're still in the first 100 years of the modern day strength and conditioning coach, right? And so we all of us have an obligation to help chronicle that as best we can, so that hopefully future generations can look back at that. Either get the have the stories and whatnot, and the process I think is important, but it's also to maybe laugh at where we were and where we are now. But guys like that, like you said, Ken Leistner, I mean, Arthur Jones. I remember us at Tampa Bay, Arthur Jones coming over, and we're doing leg extensions to failure, right? I mean, it's about as bad as they can get mechanically, but we're doing leg extensions to failure. And Mark Sonovich got to failure, and he's like, I can't do it anymore. And he's like, bullshit, you can do more. So he did another rep. He's like, bullshit, you can do more. And he pulls out a freaking 357 and cocks it back and puts it on his freaking leg, and it flew up. He's like, look, I told you got more in you.
That's what I'm talking about.
It wasn't loaded, but at the same time, I mean, it's guys like that, like Ken Leistner, Arthur Jones. I mean, they're just, I mean, we have the platform we do because of guys like that have helped build this profession at a time when people thought it was bad to lift weights for sport, and that's where I get on a soapbox and I get pissed off at other strength coaches, because honestly, in essentially 70 years, the only thing that we've done to add value to strength and conditioning, to grow it as a profession, is to add the tactical component to it. That's the only way we've really grown it, but yeah, we got people making $500,000 doing it now, and there's so much opportunity for not just a strength and conditioning coach, but really what we do is more elite human performance, right? There's so much that that you can do to help and perform, help humans perform better in a variety of capacities. That we need to grow this profession. We need to continue to have opportunities and show alternative, because as you mentioned, Tex, You know, what happens now a lot of times with young coaches is they hit that wall of like, I can't get that. I've done my GA, I've done my GA, I've done an internship, I've done a second internship, and then I throw my hands up and I'm like, I can't get a job. And instead of going out and making a job, you know, creating one from scratch, how about go be a teacher at a high school that doesn't have strength and conditioning and show the need for strength and conditioning like those coaches did 70 years ago. You know, and we're able to create a $500,000 job for somebody today, you know, and we have an obligation to do that. And those guys, that golden age of strength and conditioning, where those guys went out and created stuff from scratch, to me, that's so freaking impressive.
Well, I know we got a couple guys. Actually, old Gil from last weekend, who's a big fan of the show. I mean, that's what he's doing at that school in
Harlem.
In Harlem. Just kicked in the door and is managing to kind of from the ground up build an after-school program. He's getting a few guys in, and then, you know, there's only one trajectory there, man.
Yeah.
If you do it right.
Yeah, dude, highlight to him, he's living in Connecticut, and every job was 2 years experience. He's like, well, how do I get 2 years experience if I can't get a job? So then takes a train into Harlem every day, and then he had brought his own equipment to a room with no windows in that school, and loads up some kids, gets into
make it happen.
Yeah.
There's a guy we did a Beyond the Chalk on, John Feynman. He created what's called inner city weightlifting. He was a soccer player at one of the private colleges up in the Northeast. Can't remember which one. I think Dartmouth maybe, but you know, just got impacted by a strength coach, found a weightlifting, and became competed a little bit in weightlifting. Nothing serious. But just saw an opportunity, and didn't see an opportunity, saw a need for these gang members, you know, in the Boston area. I think it's Boston. Can't remember exactly. It's been a while since we shot that episode. But he essentially created a program where he takes gang members and teaches them how to become personal trainers and how to make money as a personal trainer, and has 3 locations, won't post the sites because of fear, has had several guys get shot and killed, and you know, that were in the program, but has helped others go on to successful careers as personal trainers, training CEOs at these companies. And it is in Boston. And just, I mean, again, I think goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Yeah, we have such a platform to affect change in the world that we need to be using that, you know, and you know, the lack of grit or the lack of perseverance to push through some of the obstacles that come across. You know, it's like that elephant that's walking down that path, and all of a sudden there's a freaking tree in front of it that just stops, and it doesn't. I mean, that's crazy. You're a freaking elephant. Just crush the damn thing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So we got 3 PLAE clinics coming up in June, the same weekend. So if you want to highlight those, we'll get this episode out before.
Yeah, got all June 8th. Thought it would be cool to kind of put on this kind of coordinated event. So we have one in Dallas area at Richland High School, and right outside of DFW area. We have one at Wayzata High School up in Minnesota, right outside of Minneapolis, and we have one at Pensacola at what's that, North Florida, right? Down there, and I mean, incredible lineups. You know, Cal Dietz, Lauren Lando, Raph, you know, John Garish, Carmen Bott, just some really, really incredible coaches speaking at all these events. Dan Dalrymple from Saints.
Smith, Power Athlete Radio alum.
Yeah, Bobby Smith, the Rift. I mean, there's a ton of great coaches coming, and you know, it's an event for strength coaches by strength coaches, and it's, you know, we go lecture, practical lecture, roundtable, and in the roundtable, the whole point of the roundtable is, I hate these conferences where you just throw a panel up and it's nobody asks a question, and it's this, you know, it's this labored affair. We put our speakers in the groups, and everybody goes around and gives their biggest pain point, and you have people give a tactical takeaway for you to go back on Monday and go back to your program with some tactical ideas to tackle your biggest pain point. And then you have opportunity to ask them questions in an intimate setting. And and then the practical component, and then obviously the lectures and whatnot. It's your typical strength conference in that way, but they're great days. I mean, we had over 160 at our event in Australia. We just blew out a great event in England, and then we have 3 here in the U.S. and then 1 in Vancouver in September as well. So awesome event.
Yeah, I attended one in 2017, the Speed Summit at Landau's place, and I thought the roundtable was one of the most valuable things because you got to sit in with all these great coaches, and it's all right, who do you want a job with? Go work your way into that roundtable and make sure they remember you. So it creates this opportunity to connect rather than put the coaches on a pedestal.
Yeah, those networking. I mean, you can't, conferences anymore, especially with things like PLAE Pro, where you can essentially create your own conference in your pocket. It's sometimes it's hard mentally to say, okay, it's worth the travel time, it's worth the time away from home and all those types of things. But what you don't get, like you just mentioned, is that opportunity to network, to interact, to ask questions, and that's why it always baffles me. It baffles me when people don't come. You invest this money and then you sit there and you be quiet and you don't ask anything. I mean, like I would ask a million questions until you tell me to shut up.
So if you're going, people, open your fucking mouth and ask.
Until you're told to shut up.
Yeah, sit down.
Yeah, shut up, Tex.
Okay, Tex, shut up.
Well, I was going to say, Tex, I mean, you were out there over there pimping these guys, and you didn't get a job at Landau's. I'm surprised with your strength and conditioning knowledge that you couldn't have landed a gig, at least cleaning the toilets.
I was out there recruiting for the Power Athlete methodology, and that's where I met Matt Erdman, Block 1 coach.
Oh, shout out to Erd.
Oh, yeah.
So
engage, inform, and convert.
Thanks,
Mission
Matt.
accomplished.
Well
Ron,
played.
hey, man, thank you so much for taking the time to hop on the show.
We know you're a busy dude.
Yeah, man, it's great to check in with you. And ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't gotten in touch with old Mr. McKeefery through his previous books, CEO Strength Coach, right, and then now Weight Room Wisdom, which sounds like a good one for like a guy like me who doesn't really know how to read. Lots of short stories.
Especially
2 3-page chapters.
Yeah, I need that.
A soon-to-be father. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff in there you could action as a soon-to-be father.
Good point.
Yeah, it's.
And maybe
there you go.
And maybe when Tex one day.
Maybe I'll have Tex read it to me, like I like my stuff read. He has all sorts of funny voices.
Well, the funny part is you keep falling asleep.
I'll try to mimic. I'll mimic all these strength coaches' voices. Get really good.
And here's the thing: if a strength coach has a goatee and shaved head, you have to get into character.
Yeah, that's I'm thinking sleeveless performance polo, shaved head, goatee. And you got to say things like, "Hey, brother."
Well, I got this Evanesh down. Old school.
No, you got to say it old school.
Zach,
you got to say it like your prostate hurts. Old school. God, this prostate hurts.
Yeah, painless prostate on this side.
I was like, I'm all flared up. I got some pee-pee.
Okay.
Schofield, we got him.
Yeah.
All right.
But Ron, thanks again, man. And I guess where are you at on social? What are your social handles so people can snip you out?
Before I do, guys, I mean, like I've told you guys a million times, I respect so much what you guys are doing. And again, going back to some of the things we talked about challenging the status quo and not just, and kind of marching to your own beat, but then turn around and being able to back it up with solid content and practical application. I think it's a testament to what you guys do on a daily basis. So appreciate you guys so much. Really do. I'm, at R McKeefery on pretty much everything social, ronmckeefery.com, PLAEperform.com, PLAE perform.com is pretty much where I live these days. So appreciate you guys so much, man.
Thanks, man. Thanks, Ron.
Thank you,
Ron. To you, buddy. Take care.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Now it's time for you to empower your performance. You can find Ron McKeefery on all social media outlets at R McKeefery. You can visit him at PLAEperform.com. That's PLAE perform.com. Or he's got his own website, ronmckeefery.com, which I highly recommend that you check out. The reason being, he has kind of his roles listed, and what I would assume is a hierarchy. First, he has listed husband, then father, then strength and conditioning coach, then author, then speaker. And I think that just speaks to the value sets of some of our guests, most specifically Ron, and being just a fucking rad person. My voice is fucked, so I'm gonna get going. Until next time, bye!